the author of the Drake equation, he is being generous when he says, well, there might be as many as 10,000 planets in our galaxy that might be able to transmit radio waves. Well, I think a better answer is 10 billion. And that changes the picture. You know, we're not the only ones in the neighborhood by any stretch of the imagination.
Clearly.
Also, the Frank doesn't include colonization and migration. In other words, you live and die as a civilization, and that's it, rather than you plant another colony over here and another colony over there, and they plant colonies down the road. And every civilization is going to realize that there can be catastrophes. An asteroid beats the heck out of your planet. Volcanoes shut out the sunlight for a year and all the plants die. You know, little things like that. So you got to be ready. A plague of some kind, a terrible flood, who knows? But you have to be ready. And the thing, you mentioned Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli. These are the closest to each other pair of sun-like stars in our local neighborhood. They're only 39 light years from here. And those two stars, both sun-like stars, are only an eighth of a light year apart. From a planet around one, looking at the other, it's visible all day long, and you can directly observe the planets around the other ones. You can tell whether they have life. And they're 1 billion years older than the sun. Now, they would certainly be expected to develop interstellar travel because there's a nearby place to go. And secondly, they've had plenty of time to do it. So we sit in our black holes here and put our hands over our eyes, and we don't want to look at what the real world is like out there. Exciting times. I wish I was younger.
Let's talk a little bit about Betty and Barney Hill.
Well, I met them both. Barney died in 1969, and then we had dinner together in Pittsburgh the first time around, and then I've seen Betty many times since. We've done television shows together. And the book Captured is by myself and Betty's niece, Kathleen Marden, who has trained in sociology, has all the hypnosis tapes. It was the first abduction that got public attention. It wasn't the first abduction. We hadn't heard about it, and that wasn't because they wanted any attention, but somebody broke a promise and released data they shouldn't have released, and so forth. Anyway, they were in New Hampshire, 1961, September 19th, driving home, spotted a UFO. This is the very short version. They stopped a couple times to look at it late at night, no traffic around. It was obviously not a star or a planet because it was along the Old Man of the Mountain, a big sort of lifelike statue rock formation. It was 1.5 times the size, and that's 48 feet big. So people say, oh, it was just a planet. Boy, that's the strangest planet like Jupiter anybody's ever seen. Anyway, they stopped. Barney had his binoculars, looked through the windows of this large round object. 2 rows of windows, strange beings inside, more or less humanoid, but not looking like us really. Scared the heck out of him because one was staring back at him. Dashed back to the car. There's some strange beeping sounds from the trunk region of the car. It happened again, and then they found themselves 30-some miles down the road. They got home 2 hours later than they should have gotten home. And it was very, very puzzling. And, I mean, they saw a UFO, no question about that. The thing was stopped. It was just a couple 100 feet away. It was hovering. It was noiseless. And they remember something in the road as they drove along, but sort of faded out. And they reported it the next day, and Kathy's mother was Betty's sister. And Kathy was in the room when Betty called her sister to tell her about seeing this UFO. Now, it was a couple of years. This missing time bothered them, and Barney developed ulcers, wasn't able to work. Went to a psychologist who sent him to Dr. Benjamin Simon, a great psychiatrist. They both wound up. This is an interracial couple, which was a little unusual for New Hampshire. Barney was black, Betty white. Now, Dr. Simon didn't know a darn thing about flying saucers, but he knew an awful lot about people who'd had post-traumatic stress disorder. They called it shell-shock war veterans back then. He actually ran a hospital with 3,000 beds for some such guys from World War II. He developed a procedure of using medical hypnosis, inducing amnesia after each session in which they relived a part of the traumatic experience. Gradually introduced it back to them and got these people working. The Army did a movie, Let There Be Light, starring Ben Simon, for the kind of work that he had done, because he had outstanding success. And what came out under hypnosis, with these two done separately and with amnesia after each session, so they couldn't talk to each other about what they had said under hypnosis, he taped them all these sessions, finally played them back a tape when he felt they were ready, a composite tape, and they were astonished to find that during that missing time, the car went down a crummy dirt road after going off the main highway. No good reason to do that at all. They were taken on board, examined, treated as specimens, put back out, told they wouldn't remember what happened, and didn't. Now, that's a pretty far-out story, let's face it. And Dr. Simon kept trying to explain it away. Betty had some dreams about being abducted within a few weeks of when this happened, and she wrote them down, and Dr. Simon would just as soon have passed off Barney's reaction. Well, Betty told him the dreams, and he incorporated them in his psyche, if you will, but it didn't work out that way. And one of the things that happened, Betty described how she's asked the leaders, I know you're not from around here, understatement of the year, where are you from? So he showed her I'll call it a hologram, a three-dimensional model, star maps, points of light connected by different kinds of lines, trips we make often, trade missions, occasional expeditions, that sort of thing. And she asks him, well, where are you on the map? Wise guy alien says, do you know where you are on the map? No, I don't know anything about astronomy. Well, how can I tell you where I'm from if you don't know where you're at? End of discussion. Dr. Simon asked her this came out under hypnosis, asked her to draw it later on. She did. It's in the book, The Interrupted Journey, way back 1965. The trouble is, what sense does it make? Well, a brilliant woman named Marjorie Fish built a total of 27 three-dimensional models of our local galactic neighborhood, little beads on strings. Hard part was getting the right distance data. It's a long story. It's told in the book, captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. But out of that came this identification of the base stars, two stars close to each other on this map, Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli. Nobody had paid any attention to these stars, but now we know they're the closest to each other pair of sun-like stars in our whole local neighborhood. That was an exciting work. I was the first to publish about it in the early 70s, and helped Marjorie at a couple of presentations that she did and stuff. And all kinds of people telling all kinds of phony baloney stories about it. It's one of the things you stand back and you say, where the heck did that come from? The same goes for Roswell, for that. They make it up. They throw darts at dartboard to come up with possible explanations.
I want to go back to what you were just talking about, that content having to do with their abduction. Is it true then that as a scientist, you accept hypnosis as a way to find data?
Well, it depends on how you define all your terms there. Yes,
okay.
The simple answer would be yes. Cops have used hypnosis to retrieve license plates and rapists' identification and stuff that the people don't kind of...
Right. I accept hypnosis as a part of the scientific
in this case,
field.
The big thing that you got to worry about is not putting ideas in the mind of the witness, not leading the witness. The witness has to tell you or relive his story, not the story you wish he were going to tell you.
Right. But assuming there's no interference that way and it's done properly.
Yes, I believe it can be used successfully. That's where Dr. Simon, your buddy's head gets blown off next to you in the battlefield. That's a little hard to live with. Why wasn't it me? Why was it him? Or this kind of thing. There are serious problems here. And Simon actually worked with guys who were blind for no good reason and got them back to being unblind, if I was seeing, I guess, would be better. So properly done. It's just like penicillin will help treat most infections, but there's some people who will die if you give them penicillin. So you can't say penicillin is all good. I'm certainly not saying all hypnotic regression sessions will give you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'm not saying that at all. has to be properly done. And remember,